The metal beneath his boots is so hot, it's burning through the leather. He can smell his own flesh cooking. Black smoke pours around him, choking, blinding. His hands are blistered from gripping the .50 caliber machine gun, but he can't let go. Won't let go. 50 yards away, a wall of white shapes moves through the snow. German soldiers, hundreds of them. Behind them, the massive silhouettes of panzer tanks, their cannons swinging toward him like the fingers of death. He's standing on a burning tank destroyer that could explode any second, and everyone thinks he's insane. Maybe he is. But if he steps down now, if he runs, every man behind him dies. So, 19-year-old Audie Murphy makes a choice. He stays, he fights, and what happens next will become legend. But let's go back. Because to understand how a boy who barely weighed 100 pounds became the man who refused to die, you need to know where he came from. And it wasn't pretty. Hunt County, Texas. June 20th, 1920. Audie Leon Murphy was born in a sharecropper's shack that had more holes than walls. 7th of 12 children. His father, Emmett Murphy, was a drifter who could barely support one child, let alone 12. His mother, Josie, was a tiny woman worn down by constant pregnancy and crushing poverty. The Murphy family didn't have electricity, didn't have running water, didn't have enough food. They moved constantly. Farmersville, Greenville, Celeste. Little Texas towns where the soil was hard and the living was harder. Young Audie wore clothes held together with hope and string. His shoes, when he had them, were hand-me-downs that never fit. He went to bed hungry most nights. Not the kind of hungry where you're a little peckish. The kind where your stomach cramps and you can't sleep and you dream about food. Then October 29 arrived. The stock market crashed. The Great Depression came roaring in like a hurricane. Suddenly, everyone was poor, not just the Murphys. But the Murphys had already been at the bottom, and now the bottom gave way. Emmett took whatever work he could find, day labor, cotton picking, anything. It wasn't enough. So at 5 years old, Audie went to work. 5 years old. He picked cotton in the blazing Texas heat, dragging a sack nearly as big as himself. His hands bled from the sharp cotton bolls. His back screamed, but the family needed the $1 a day he earned. By the time he was 12, school was a memory. He dropped out in 5th grade to work full time. Reading and writing would have to wait. Survival couldn't. But Audie discovered something. He could shoot. His father had an old rifle, and Audie had a gift. He hunted rabbit, squirrel, possum, anything with elk meat on it to feed his brothers and sisters. And he never missed. Couldn't afford to. Every bullet cost money. So he learned patience, learned to control his breathing, learned to squeeze the trigger at exactly the right moment. One shot, one kill. It became his code. When Audie was 14, his father walked out, just disappeared one day and never came back. Josie was left alone with 12 children and no money. She took in laundry, cleaned houses, worked herself to the bone. At 16, Audie's mother died. The doctor said it was heart failure. Audie knew better. She died of exhaustion, poverty, and a broken heart. The family shattered. The younger children went to an orphanage. Audie and his older siblings scattered, taking whatever work existed. He delivered newspapers, worked at a radio repair shop, picked more cotton. He was small, maybe 5'5", 110 pounds, soaking wet. But he was tough in ways that had nothing to do with size. Life had taught him that quitting wasn't an option. December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. Japan attacked, and America went to war. Audie was 16, working dead-end jobs for pennies. He saw the war as an escape, not just from poverty, but from a life with no future. So he tried to enlist in the Marines. The recruiter looked at this skinny kid and laughed. Rejected. Underweight. He tried the Navy. Same answer. The Army said no too. Audie Murphy had heard the word no his entire life. It had never stopped him. His sister helped him forge documents about his age. He stuffed himself with food, gaining a few precious pounds. He tried the Army again. June 30th, 1942. They accepted him. He was 17, though the paper said 18. The uniform hung on him like a tent. Basic training at Camp Walters, Texas. The drill sergeants saw this scrawny kid and figured he'd wash out immediately, but Audie loved it. The structure, the discipline, 3 meals a day, every day, more food than he'd ever seen. And the rifle range, he was the best shot in the entire company. Not just good, the best. Those years hunting to keep his family alive had turned him into something exceptional. He was assigned to Company B, 1st Battalion, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division. Early 1943, they shipped out. North Africa first, training and preparation. Then July 10th, 1940, the invasion of Sicily. Audie Murphy, 18 years old, had never left Texas before the Army. Now, he was storming a hostile beach while machine guns chewed up the sand around him and mortar shells rained down. His first kill came days later. 2 Italian officers fleeing through an olive grove. Audie raised his rifle, squeezed the trigger twice. Both men fell. He vomited afterward, shaking uncontrollably. That night, he couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. He'd killed men, ended their lives. But combat doesn't give you time to process. The next day brought more fighting. And the day after that. Audie got used to it. Had to. Sicily fell. Next came the Italian mainland. September 1940, the landing at Salerno. Audie and 2 other soldiers were scouting along the Volturno River when German machine guns opened up from a hidden position. One of his friends died instantly, his chest torn open. Audie didn't freeze. He grabbed grenades, charged the position, killed 5 Germans. No vomiting this time. Something inside him had changed. The Italian campaign was hell, fighting in mountains, through mud, in freezing rain. The Germans defended every ridge, every town, every river crossing, but Audie kept fighting, kept killing, kept surviving when men around him died in horrible ways. Near Hill 193, his company was attacked. Audie killed 3 Germans in close combat, captured 4 more. They promoted him to sergeant. The winter of 1943 to 1944 was brutal. Company B fought through Italian mountains against German positions that seemed impregnable. Men died from enemy fire, from exposure, from diseases that turned their insides to water. Audie Murphy just kept going. He was promoted to staff sergeant. Then something extraordinary happened. He received a battlefield commission to 2nd lieutenant. A farm boy who dropped out in 5th grade was now an officer. He was 19 years old. August 15th, for Operation Dragoon, the invasion of southern France. Murphy landed on the beaches and fought inland. More combat, more dead friends, more nightmares that he couldn't afford to acknowledge because morning always brought more fighting. He earned the Distinguished Service Cross, the 2nd highest military decoration for extreme gallantry in combat. then 2 silver stars, then bronze stars, then Purple Hearts. For wounds he barely noticed because he was too busy trying to stay alive. By January 1940, Audie Murphy had been in combat for 18 months. He'd fought across Sicily, up the Italian peninsula, and through France. He'd seen things that would make strong men weep. Company B, which started with 128 men, had been bled white. Replacements came and died. More replacements came. They died too. But Lieutenant Murphy was still there, still fighting. The Colmar Pocket, a German-held bulge in eastern France near the Rhine River. The Germans were surrounded, cut off, but they wouldn't surrender. The fighting was vicious. The weather was miserable. Freezing temperatures, snow, ice. The ground was frozen so hard you couldn't dig a foxhole with dynamite. January 23rd, the 30th Infantry Regiment attacked the woods near Holtzwihr. German tanks and infantry cut them to pieces. Bodies lay frozen in the snow. The 30th retreated, shattered. The next day, someone had to try again. That someone was the 15th Regiment. Company B led the assault. The fighting was apocalyptic. German artillery and machine guns killed Americans by the dozen. By evening, on January 25th, Company B had advanced 600 yards and paid for every inch in blood. All the company's officers, except Lieutenant Murphy, were dead. 102 of the 120 enlisted men were killed or wounded. Company B effectively no longer existed. Murphy commanded what remained, about 40 scared, exhausted, half-frozen men. That night, Murphy called for tank destroyer support. 2 M10s arrived, tracked vehicles with open-topped turrets mounting 3-inch guns and 50-caliber machine guns. Murphy positioned them and his infantry as best he could. He knew the Germans would counterattack. They always did. He was right. January 26, 1940, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, German artillery started falling. Murphy grabbed his field telephone and called for American artillery support. Then he saw them. 6 German tanks rumbling through the snow. Behind them, about 250 German infantry in white winter camouflage, nearly invisible against the snow. The German tanks opened fire. One of the American M10s took a direct hit. It burst into flames. The crew bailed out, sprinting for cover. The second M10 tried to maneuver but was hit too. Its crew abandoned it and ran. Murphy's infantry were pinned down by machine gun fire. The Germans kept advancing, 200 yards, 150 yards. Murphy was on the telephone, shouting coordinates to the artillery. His men were starting to fall back. If they retreated now, the entire American line would collapse. The Germans would pour through the gap. Hundreds of Americans would die. Murphy made a decision that should have killed him. He ran forward, not back toward safety. Forward, toward the burning M10 that had been abandoned. Machine gun bullets kicked up snow around his feet. He didn't stop. He reached the burning tank destroyer and climbed onto it. The crew had abandoned it because it was on fire and about to explode. The fuel tanks were full. Ammunition was still on board. One good hit, and the whole thing would detonate like a bomb. Murphy didn't care. He grabbed the 50-caliber machine gun mounted on the turret, swung it toward the advancing Germans, and opened fire. The Germans were shocked. They thought everyone in that burning hulk was dead. Machine gun fire immediately converged on Murphy's position. Rifles cracked. Machine guns chattered. Tank cannons boomed. He was being shot at from 3 directions. He kept firing. He had the field telephone with him, the cord stretching from his command post. He was calling in artillery strikes while firing the machine gun, screaming coordinates, adjusting fire, killing Germans. A shell landed 5 feet away. The blast picked him up and slammed him back down. His ears rang. Blood ran from his nose. He kept firing. The heat under him was unbearable. The fire inside the tank destroyer was spreading. Flames licked up through gaps in the armor. The metal was so hot he could feel it through his boots, through his uniform. His hands blistered and bled from gripping the hot machine gun, but he couldn't let go. If he let go, he was dead. His men were dead. A German bullet hit him in the right leg, tearing through muscle. He grunted, shifted his weight to his left leg, and kept firing. Blood ran down into his boot, warm and sticky. Pain flared white-hot. He ignored it. Ignored everything except the Germans trying to kill him. They were trying to flank him. 6 German soldiers worked their way through a ditch to his right. Murphy saw them, swung the .50 caliber, cut them down in seconds. More Germans charged from the front. He mowed them down. A German tank fired at him. The shell missed by feet, exploding in the snow. The concussion nearly knocked him off the burning vehicle. Murphy's world narrowed to 3 things: the machine gun in his hands, the Germans trying to kill him, the artillery coordinates. He was screaming into the telephone. Everything else disappeared. The pain, the fear, the certainty of death, none of it mattered, only killing Germans before they killed his men. Smoke from the burning tank destroyer poured around him, choking him. He coughed up black phlegm and kept firing. His ammunition belt was running low. He could feel it getting lighter. The Germans sensed it too. They pressed harder, trying to overwhelm him before he ran dry. He killed them, killed more, kept killing. Then his machine gun stopped, out of ammunition. Murphy stared at the empty gun for 1 second. The German infantry, thinking he was finished, rushed forward. Murphy grabbed the telephone and adjusted artillery fire directly onto his own position. Shells began landing 50 yards in front of him, then closer. American high-explosive rounds tore into the advancing Germans. Bodies flew through the air. The German attack stalled. Murphy climbed down from the burning tank destroyer. His right leg buckled, but he stayed on his feet. He could see his men, still pinned down. He limped toward them, his leg leaving a trail of blood in the snow. When he reached them, he didn't collapse. He organized them, got them on their feet, led them in a counterattack. The Germans, shocked to see this half-dead lieutenant still fighting, broke and ran. Murphy and his men retook their positions. The German attack was shattered. American artillery continued falling on the retreating enemy. The line held. The next day, reinforced American troops captured Holtzwihr. The Colmar pocket began to collapse. Medics evacuated Murphy for his leg wound. It wasn't serious enough to send him home. He'd be back in a few weeks. When his after-action report reached headquarters, officers read it and said it couldn't be true. No one man could do what Murphy claimed, but multiple witnesses confirmed every detail, every impossible detail. June 2nd, 1940, the war in Europe was over. Audie Murphy, now 20 years old, stood at attention as General Jacob Devers pinned the Medal of Honor to his chest. The highest military decoration America can award. It's given for conspicuous gallantry at the risk of life, above and beyond the call of duty. Murphy had spent an hour on a burning tank destroyer, alone, wounded, fighting off hundreds of enemy soldiers. He'd earned it. But standing there receiving the medal, Murphy felt nothing. Empty. He'd killed over 240 German soldiers during the war. He'd seen his friends blown apart, burned alive. Shot down, he'd expected to die every day for 18 months. And he'd survived. Why? Why him and not the better men who died? The medal felt heavy, not because of its weight, but because of what it represented. All the death, all the fear, all the things he could never unsee. By war's end, Murphy had 33 military decorations: the Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, the Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars, 3 Purple Hearts, French and Belgian decorations. He was the most decorated American combat soldier of World War II. He was 20 years old and he felt ancient. The war ended, but for Murphy, it never stopped. The nightmares started immediately. Terrible ones. He'd wake up screaming back in Italy or France, watching his friends die over and over. He couldn't sleep without a loaded pistol under his pillow, couldn't stand crowded rooms because they felt like traps. Loud noises sent him diving for cover, his heart hammering, sweat pouring down his face. He developed an addiction to sleeping pills, desperate for a few hours of rest without reliving battles. He slept with every light in his room on because darkness brought the dead. He had fits of rage over nothing, anger that came from nowhere and terrified him. Today, we call it PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. In 1945, they called it shell shock or battle fatigue, and there was almost no treatment. You were just supposed to get over it, be a man, move on. But Audie Murphy couldn't move on. The war lived inside him. He was famous, though, the most decorated hero of the war. Life magazine put him on the cover. James Cagney, the film star, saw him and suggested acting. In 1948, Murphy moved to Hollywood with no training and no connections, just his face and his fame. His first roles were small, but he had something audiences connected with. That quiet intensity, that sense of having seen too much. He wasn't a great actor, but he was genuine. In 1949, he published his autobiography, To Hell and Back, with a ghostwriter. It became a bestseller. People wanted to know about the hero. They didn't want to know about the nightmares. Universal Pictures bought the film rights and wanted Murphy to play himself. He refused at first. How could he reenact the worst moments of his life? But they convinced him. In 1955, To Hell and Back was released. Audie Murphy played himself, reliving the battles, including that hour on the burning tank destroyer. The film became Universal's highest-grossing picture until Jaws 20 years later. Murphy made 44 films over the next 15 years, mostly westerns and war movies. He was a decent actor, made good money, lost it on bad investments, made it again. He married, had 2 sons. To the outside world, he seemed successful, but inside, he was still fighting the war. To his eternal credit, Murphy did something extraordinary. He spoke publicly about his PTSD. In the 1950s and 60s, when mental illness was shameful and war heroes were supposed to be stoic and strong, Audie Murphy admitted he had nightmares, admitted he needed help. He advocated for better mental health care for veterans, pushed for research into battle fatigue. He became the first major public figure to speak openly about what we now call PSD. His advocacy helped thousands of veterans from Korea and Vietnam get treatment they desperately needed. He saved lives after the war just like he had during it. May 28th, Audie Murphy was 45 years old. He boarded a small private plane in Atlanta, heading to Virginia for a business meeting. The weather was terrible, fog and rain, poor visibility. The pilot should have diverted. Instead, he continued flying by visual reference into instrument conditions. Near Brush Mountain in Virginia, the plane flew directly into the mountainside. Everyone aboard died on impact. America mourned. the most decorated soldier of World War II, dead in a senseless accident. He survived Sicily, Italy, France, and that hour on a burning tank destroyer, only to die because a pilot made a bad decision in bad weather. The irony was cruel. They buried him at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. His grave became the second most visited at Arlington after President Kennedy's. Even now, more than 50 years later, people leave coins, flowers, and American flags. Veterans visit and salute. Children ask their parents who he was, and the story gets told again. Audie Murphy's headstone is simple. It lists his rank, his dates of birth and death, and the words, Medal of Honor. It doesn't mention the poverty, doesn't mention the hunting to feed his family, or the 5th grade education, or the nightmares that haunted him every night. It doesn't mention the sleeping pills or the loaded gun or the terror of crowded rooms. But all of that was Audie Murphy, too. He was extraordinary, not because he didn't feel fear, but because he felt it and acted anyway. Not because the war didn't break him, but because he kept going, even when broken. He stood on that burning tank destroyer, not because he wanted to die, but because he refused to let his men die. And he spoke about his PTSD not because it made him look weak, but because he knew other veterans were suffering in silence. That frozen afternoon in January 1940, when 19-year-old Audie Murphy climbed onto a burning tank destroyer and fought off 250 German soldiers for an hour, he became a legend. But the man behind the legend was more complicated, more human, and ultimately more admirable than any legend could capture. He was a hungry child who learned to shoot, a teenager who lied to escape poverty, a soldier who killed to survive, a hero who never felt heroic, and a man who carried his battles long after the guns fell silent. When you think of Audie Murphy, remember the burning tank destroyer. But also remember the boy in Texas who went to bed hungry. Remember the soldier who vomited after his first kill. Remember the man who woke up screaming 30 years after the war ended. Remember that heroes aren't made of steel. They're made of flesh and fear and determination. And sometimes, on days when hell itself comes calling, they climb onto burning vehicles and refuse to quit. Not because they're fearless, but because someone has to stand. Someone has to fight, and that someone was Audie Murphy.